Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on connecting ideas, which is the second part of a two-part webinar series on Milestone 3 for History 113 and 114 at SNHU. I'm your Learning Community Facilitator for the History 113 and 114 Learning Community, Natalie Sweet. Now, as I stated before, this is the second part of a two-part series on Milestone 3. So if you missed Milestone 1, make certain that you return back to our learning community to watch the first part, or you can visit my YouTube page, which is connected within our learning community. It's at the top tab of the learning community. You can go there and catch that webinar, or you can catch any other webinar that has been held so far this term. So do make certain that you check that out. As we continue to talk about Milestone 3, this is really the week that you are about to submit that assignment. So you want to make certain that your submission has a few key things as you move forward. And here are what those three things are. First, have you included enough evidence within your paper? In other words, have you used two primary and two secondary sources from that provided list that your instructor has given you to use? And two, I would emphasize this week, if you can avoid it, do not rely on Trowbridge, which is the e-text for the class. Instead, you should really be using those primary and secondary sources. And the reason for this is that this is an analysis paper. Ultimately, what your instructor is grading you on is how well you use those sources within your final project folder kit to make your argument. Next, have you adequately cited your evidence? Have you cited quotations? Have you cited when you paraphrase material? If you brought in other ideas and thoughts from sources, those need to be properly cited and referenced within your paper. And the third point that we're going to be talking about tonight, does your submission flow? Remember, as a whole, Milestone 3 works together to form the evidence that supports the thesis of your paper. And ultimately, even though you've built a paragraph of evidence around each of the supporting points that you made within your thesis, those three supporting points need to come back to support that initial, that central claim of your paper. In other words, those three paragraphs work together within your paper, so there needs to be flow and connection there. For Milestone 3, again, you built a paragraph proof around each of the three claims within your thesis. And again, this is a point, I keep coming back to it, but make certain that your paragraphs are not only backing up your supporting claim, but the central claim of your paper as well. Let's go back and think about that initial thesis statement that we created in one of our first webinars of the term. We created a thesis statement that addressed the research question of what Northern opinion of Mary Todd Lincoln was during the Civil War. And our central claim was that overall opinion was rather low of the First Lady, mainly because of perceptions involving her Confederate relatives, her spending habits, and the entertainments that she threw. So even though we built paragraphs of evidence around each of those supporting points, now we're going to move on and make certain that those 3 points clearly demonstrate that initial claim that Northern support was low throughout the war. Let's talk about how we can check our evidence in each paragraph to make certain that everything's working together too. Here are the questions you want to address. Is there evidence from your primary sources within your paragraphs? Now, my recommendation is this. As you go through and you look at your evidence, see if you are using a piece of primary source evidence in at least each of your paragraphs to help make your claim. Remember, you should have 2 instances where you have used primary source information throughout this milestone. From there, you then want to look to see if there is evidence from your secondary sources spread throughout each of your paragraphs of within your paper. So, two again need to be used here at least throughout these 3 paragraphs that you've created. And their third point, have you explained how the evidence that you're presenting supports the claim? This is an area where you really want to be explicit. And here's a suggestion for what I have for you, how you can double check on this. As you read through each paragraph, after you reach the end of the paragraph, look at your thesis statement, then look at the paragraph and say, okay, why am I telling my reader this? Then you can craft sentences that help explicitly tie the information that you've pulled together in your argument back to that central thesis statement. For the next point, should you have cited? Here are some easy ways to determine whether or not you should have included a citation with your information. First, did you include a direct quote from your primary or your secondary sources? In that instance, you definitely need to include a citation. Now remember, we don't include citations only if we use quoted materials. Did you paraphrase ideas from your secondary and primary sources? If you did so, you should include a citation for that information. Even if you put those ideas in your own words, those ideas were not originally yours, and you should give credit to that point. And for the third point, did you include information within your paper that you would have had no knowledge of without your primary or secondary sources? Sometimes I know students are concerned about, okay, well, when do I cite? Well, if you were not familiar with that information before and you had to rely on another source to help your understanding of that, that's when you need to give credit where credit is due. What these points now lead us to is checking how well your paper flows and really using connecting sentences within your paragraph will not only make it sound grammatically more sound, but it will help your overall argument as well. Remember, in Milestone 3, you are building not only just the foundation, but really the heart, the support of your paper with this evidence. And each piece of evidence should back the next piece of evidence up. You want to make it as strong as possible. And therefore making certain that the flow of your paper, that your argument just naturally goes forward, that's going to strengthen your argument as a whole too. Remember, your paper should help your reader understand that the ideas in each separate paragraph are all connected to proving that central point within your thesis. So, what types of connecting phrases and words can you use to help your paragraphs transition along? You might consider these phrases: another way that, in addition to, at the same time, not only, but also. Furthermore, another key point, similarly, equally important, likewise. These words and phrases will connect your ideas together and help the flow of your paper. It will signal to your reader that you are building the evidence to support your thesis. Once all of this is in place, I do recommend being in touch with the SNHU Writing Center. They're going to be able to help you double check for grammatical errors that might involve grammar, spelling, syntax, organization, and citations. So do be in touch with them. And remember too that you can be in touch with the learning community as well. Maybe you want to share one of your paragraphs, or maybe you want to check on the flow of one paragraph to the next. Know that you can come to the learning community and share portions of your paper with the community for further feedback. We're going to be there for you, and you're going to get positive feedback in a friendly environment where you don't have to worry about any grading taking place. And another point I want to emphasize as you move through, keep working within the e-materials while you work on milestone 3. And once you receive feedback on milestone 3, beginning next week, make certain that you return back to where you completed milestone 3 and that you edit those templates. Apply the feedback to the assignment. It's going to eventually be added to your final project. You're not going to have to complete a separate file. In fact, as we have been working on milestone after milestone, it has been compiled into a single file that you're going to download during week 8 from your e-materials. So keep that in mind as you move forward. If you have any questions after watching this webinar, please come to the History 113, 114 Learning Community. There you're going to find extra resources and conversation that is going to help you think about how to further develop your final project and your milestone assignments. I look forward to seeing you there.